Hi, I'm Dave B, and welcome to a literary journey of epic proportions. Today we're embarking on a rather ambitious quest to explore every single novel penned by the inimitable, the prolific, the titan of Victorian literature himself, Charles Dickens. We're not just dipping our toes in, we are diving headfirst into the smog-filled streets of London, the debtors' prisons, the sprawling country estates, and the very heart of the 19th century human condition. We will proceed chronologically from his boisterous debut to his final unfinished mystery, tracing the evolution of a writer who didn't just tell stories. He shaped the way we see the world, and even how we celebrate holidays. So grab a cup of tea, settle in, and prepare for a cavalcade of unforgettable characters. But why Dickens? And why now? Well, for one, his influence is inescapable. From legal dramas that echo the labyrinthine court of Chancery in Bleak House to the very idea of a Scrooge, his creations are woven into the fabric of our culture. But more than that, Dickens was a master of the human spectacle. He saw the world in all its glorious, heartbreaking, and often absurd detail. He navigated the vast gulf between the rich and the poor, the powerful and the powerless, with an empathy and a righteous anger that still feel incredibly relevant today. He was a social reformer with a pen, a comedian with a conscience, and a storyteller whose plots are as intricate and sprawling as the city he so often wrote about. This series is for everyone. It's for the die-hard Dickensians who can quote Mr. Micawber at the drop of a hat. And it's for those who maybe only know him from A Christmas Carol and are curious about what else is out there. We're going to unpack the big ideas, the historical context, the stylistic quirks, and of course the incredible stories that have captivated readers for nearly 2 centuries. We'll look at how his own life experiences, his time working in a blacking factory, his career as a journalist, bled into his fiction, giving it a raw, authentic power that few have ever matched. It's a marathon, not a sprint, but I promise it will be worth every step. So let's begin at the beginning. Before the social critiques became razor sharp, before the serialized cliffhangers became a national obsession, there was a young writer known only by his pseudonym, Boz. He was about to publish his first novel, a sprawling, episodic, and wonderfully funny book that would take the literary world by storm and set the stage for one of the most legendary careers in all of literature. It was a book that didn't know it was a book at first, a collection of sketches that grew into something much, much bigger. We're starting our journey with the novel that started it all, the posthumous papers of the Pickwick Club. Imagine London in 1836. A young, ambitious journalist named Charles Dickens, writing under the pen name Boz, is approached with a proposition. The publishers, Chapman and Hall, want him to write the text to accompany a series of humorous illustrations by the popular artist Robert Seymour. The idea is to chronicle the comical misadventures of a group of gentlemen sportsmen, members of a so-called Nimrod Club. It was meant to be a light, fluffy affair, with the illustrations taking center stage. Dickens, however, ever the storyteller, had other plans. He agreed, but on the condition that he would create the characters and the narrative, and the illustrations would follow his lead, not the other way around. This crucial negotiation gave birth to the posthumous papers of the Pickwick Club. Initially, the project was a bit of a gamble. It was to be published in monthly installments, a format that was still relatively new for fiction, but was popular for things like serial cartoons. The first few numbers didn't sell particularly well, and tragedy struck early when the illustrator Robert Seymour died by suicide after the second installment. It seemed like the project might be doomed before it even truly began, but Dickens, with a resilience that would define his career, pressed on. A new illustrator, Hablot Knight Brown, or Fizz, was brought on board, and a new character was introduced who would change everything. That character was Sam Weller, Mr. Pickwick's street-smart, witty and unfailingly loyal Cockney valet. With Sam's introduction in the 10th chapter, sales exploded. His proverbial wisdom, humorous observations and unique dialect captivated the public imagination. Suddenly, the Pickwick Papers wasn't just a series of amusing sketches, it was a cultural phenomenon. People would gather on the docks to get the latest installment as it arrived from England. The format of serialized fiction, with its built-in suspense and community of readers all experiencing the story together month by month, proved to be a masterstroke. Dickens had stumbled upon the perfect delivery system for his brand of storytelling. At its heart, The Pickwick Papers is a picaresque novel, a genre that follows a wandering, often roguish hero on a series of disconnected adventures. The hero here is the kind-hearted, naive and perpetually bewildered Samuel Pickwick, Esquire, founder of the Pickwick Club. Along with his companions, the poetical Snodgrass, the amorous Tupman and the sporting Winkle, he travels around the English countryside, ostensibly to report on his observations of life and human nature. What follows is less a scientific report and more a cascade of farcical situations, from romantic misunderstandings and electoral chaos to a famously unjust breach of promise lawsuit that lands Mr. Pickwick in the Fleet prison for debtors. The tone of Pickwick is overwhelmingly comedic. It's a novel filled with bonhomie, slapstick, and a genuine warmth that radiates from its central character. Mr. Pickwick is a figure of pure benevolence, an innocent abroad in a world that is often cynical and scheming. The humour comes from the clash between his guileless nature and the absurdity of the situations he finds himself in. Whether he's accidentally ending up in a young ladies' boarding school at night or being mistaken for a political rival, his misadventures are driven by misunderstanding and his own charming incompetence. The world of Pickwick is a sunnier, more cheerful version of England than the one Dickens would later portray. But even here, in his very first novel, we can see the seeds of the social commentator Dickens would become. The most significant tonal shift occurs when Mr. Pickwick is wrongfully imprisoned in the Fleet. Here, the light-hearted comedy gives way to a more sober depiction of the squalor, despair, and injustice of the debtor's prison system. Dickens introduces us to a world of poverty and suffering that stands in stark contrast to the cheerful countryside inns of the earlier chapters. This section is a powerful indictment of a legal system that punished poverty as a crime, a theme he would return to with even greater force in later works like Little Dorrit. It's a glimpse behind the curtain of Victorian society. The novel's structure is loose and episodic, a direct result of its serialized origins. There isn't a single driving plot so much as a collection of vignettes and interpolated tales told by various characters the Pickwickians meet on their travels. These stories within the story range from spooky ghost stories to grim tales of woe, adding to the book's rich and varied tapestry. This freewheeling style allowed Dickens the flexibility to respond to his audience's tastes and to experiment with different narrative modes. It feels less like a tightly constructed novel and more like a grand, sprawling entertainment, a literary variety show hosted by Boz himself. Ultimately, The Pickwick Papers is a celebration of friendship, loyalty, and the simple joys of travel and companionship. It established Charles Dickens as a literary superstar and perfected the model of serialized fiction that would dominate the Victorian literary marketplace. While it may lack the intricate plotting and deep social critique of his later masterpieces, it possesses an infectious energy and a comic brilliance all its own. It is the work of a young author discovering the sheer joy and power of his own voice. And in Samuel Pickwick, he created one of literature's great innocents, a man whose goodness shines as a beacon of light in a sometimes foolish world. If The Pickwick Papers was a sunny romp through the English countryside, Dickens's second novel, Oliver Twist, or The Parish Boy's Progress, was a plunge into the darkest shadows of the urban abyss. Published concurrently with the later parts of Pickwick between 1837 and 1839, Oliver Twist represented a dramatic shift in tone and subject matter. Here, the youthful exuberance of Boz gives way to a searing indictment of social injustice. The novel opens not with a cheerful gathering of gentlemen, but with the birth of a nameless orphan in a parish workhouse, his mother dying just moments after he draws his first breath. It is one of the most stark and memorable openings in English literature. The world Oliver is born into is governed by the cold, cruel logic of the New Poor Law of 1834. This law established the workhouse system, which was intentionally designed to be so harsh and degrading that only the truly desperate would seek its shelter. Dickens, who had experienced poverty firsthand as a child, despised this system and its underlying philosophy. Through the character of the pompous beadle Mr. Bumble and the callous workhouse board, he satirizes the bureaucratic indifference and outright cruelty of those in power. The famous scene where a starving Oliver dares to ask for more gruel is not just a dramatic moment, it is a powerful symbol of the powerless pleading for basic human decency from an unfeeling system. From the workhouse, Oliver's journey is a catalogue of exploitation and abuse. He is apprenticed to an undertaker, Mr. Sowerbury, where he is tormented by another apprentice, Noah Claypole, and the maid Charlotte. Goaded beyond endurance, Oliver finally fights back and runs away, making the long trek to London. This journey from a grim, oppressive countryside to the sprawling, dangerous metropolis is a key transition. He is trading one kind of prison for another. London, for Oliver, is not a city of opportunity, but a labyrinth of crime and poverty. A place where an innocent child can be easily swallowed up and disappear forever without anyone noticing or caring. It is in London that Oliver falls in with one of literature's most unforgettable troops of villains, the gang of young pickpockets led by the charismatic and terrifying Fagin. Fagin is depicted as a wily old gentleman, a master manipulator who preys on homeless children, training them to be thieves and rewarding them with a roof over their heads while he profits from their crimes. He's both a grotesque caricature and a chillingly effective mentor. Through Fagin and his den, Dickens exposes the criminal underworld that existed just beneath the surface of respectable Victorian society, a hidden ecosystem with its own rules, its own language, and its own brutal form of justice. The criminal world of Oliver Twist is populated by some of Dickens's most vivid and frightening creations. Alongside Fagin, there is the brutal housebreaker Bill Sikes, a figure of pure, unrestrained violence. Sikes is not a complex character, he is a monster, a walking embodiment of rage and cruelty, whose very presence inspires fear. His relationship with his girlfriend Nancy is a tragic portrait of domestic abuse and misplaced loyalty. Nancy is one of the novel's most complex characters. A product of the criminal underworld, she is nonetheless capable of profound compassion and self-sacrifice, ultimately giving her life in an attempt to save Oliver. The novel is often described as one of the first to feature a child protagonist, and Oliver's persistent, almost supernatural innocence is central to its moral vision. Despite being raised in the workhouse and surrounded by criminals, Oliver's innate goodness never wavers. He speaks in perfect English, recoils from dishonesty, and maintains a pure heart. To some modern readers, this can feel unrealistic, but for Dickens it was a crucial part of his argument. He was pushing back against the Victorian idea that poverty and criminality were inherited traits, that the poor were morally corrupt by nature. Oliver is proof that virtue can exist and survive even in the most depraved environments. The plot of Oliver Twist is driven by a series of coincidences and a hidden family mystery, a style that would become a Dickensian trademark. It turns out that Oliver is not just a random orphan, but the illegitimate son of a wealthy gentleman, and a conspiracy led by his villainous half-brother Monks is determined to destroy him and deny him his inheritance. The intricate web connecting the criminal underworld of Fagin to the respectable world of Oliver's lost family, represented by the benevolent Mr. Brownlow and the Maylie family, shows how these two spheres of society are not as separate as they might seem. The secrets of the wealthy have a direct and devastating impact on the lives of the poor. Oliver Twist was a sensation, solidifying Dickens' fame and establishing his reputation as a powerful voice for social reform. It shocked its middle-class readers with its unflinching depiction of child poverty, crime, and urban decay. While Pickwick had made them laugh, Oliver made them confront the uncomfortable truths about the society they lived in. It is a darker, angrier, and more tightly plotted novel than its predecessor. A powerful melodrama that uses its iconic characters, the innocent Oliver, the monstrous Sikes, the complex Nancy, and the unforgettable Fagin, to shine a light into the darkest corners of the human soul and the deepest injustices of the social order. So after the grim realities of the workhouse in Oliver Twist, Dickens pivots, but he doesn't exactly lighten up. I mean, he does, but he also doesn't. It's complicated. Welcome to the life and adventures of Nicholas Nickleby, published between 1838 and 1839. This novel, his third, sees Dickens returning to a more sprawling, picaresque style, reminiscent of the Pickwick Papers. But this time it's infused with a much sharper, more focused social critique. The central nervous system of this story is the concept of family. Not just the warm, fuzzy, idealized version, but family as a burden, a responsibility, and a source of profound, soul-crushing injustice. It's about the ties that bind and also the ties that strangle. The story kicks off, as so many of Dickens' stories do, with a sudden reversal of fortune. The Nickleby family, once comfortably settled in the countryside, is plunged into poverty following the death of Nicholas's father. This financial collapse forces Nicholas, his sister Kate, and their rather naive and comically verbose mother to travel to London. They must throw themselves upon the mercy of their only living relative, the wealthy but utterly monstrous moneylender Ralph Nickleby. And if you think the name Ralph Nickleby sounds like the name of a villain, you are, to put it mildly, not wrong. He is the walking, talking embodiment of cold, calculating familial cruelty. Ralph Nickleby isn't just unhelpful, he is actively malicious, viewing his desperate relatives as mere pawns in his own financial and social games. He sees their vulnerability not as a reason to extend a helping hand, but as an opportunity to exploit. He ships Nicholas off to the now infamous Dotheboys Hall in Yorkshire, a school for unwanted boys run by the sadistic and grotesquely negligent Wackford Squeers. Meanwhile, he places Kate in a precarious position as a milliner's assistant, essentially dangling her as bait for his lecherous aristocratic clients. Family, in Ralph's worldview, is not a safety net. It's a commodity to be leveraged for personal gain. This sets up the novel's primary conflict: Nicholas's struggle to protect his family's honor and survival against the machinations of his own uncle. It's a battle of youthful idealism versus cynical, entrenched greed. Nicholas, unlike Oliver, is not a passive victim. He is spirited, righteous, and prone to dramatic, impulsive action. His journey isn't just about finding his place in the world, it's about actively carving out a space where decency and compassion can exist, defying the cruel logic of a society that so often rewards the very worst kinds of behavior. The question isn't just will the Nicklebys survive, but can goodness itself survive in a world governed by Ralph Nicklebys? And that brings us to the heart of the injustice explored in the novel. Dotheboys Hall is not just a bad school, it is a microcosm of systemic societal cruelty. Dickens based his depiction on the very real Yorkshire boarding schools, which were notorious for their abuse and neglect of children, effectively acting as dumping grounds for illegitimate or inconvenient offspring. Through the one-eyed, brutish Wackford Squeers and his equally monstrous family, Dickens launches a full-scale assault on the indifference of a society that allows such horrors to fester. The school's educational philosophy is a cruel parody. Boys spell winder and then are forced to go clean one. It's learning by doing, if the doing is unpaid child labour. Nicholas's time at Dotheboys Hall is short-lived, but it's a pivotal moment in the narrative. He witnesses firsthand the starvation, the beatings, and the utter despair of the boys trapped there, particularly the broken-spirited Smike. Nicholas's eventual violent rebellion against Squeers, thrashing him with his own cane in front of the abused students, is one of the most cathartic moments in all of Dickens. It's a visceral, righteous explosion against institutionalized cruelty. When Nicholas helps Smike escape, he takes on a responsibility that will shadow him for the rest of the novel, cementing his role as a protector of the downtrodden and a sworn enemy of injustice wherever he finds it. Meanwhile, back in London, Kate Nickleby is facing a different, but no less insidious form of injustice, and her plight highlights the extreme vulnerability of young unmarried women in the Victorian era. At the mercy of her uncle, she is paraded before his predatory associates like the vile Sir Mulberry Hawk. Her beauty and virtue are treated as assets to be potentially traded for Ralph's financial advantage. Kate's story is a harrowing exploration of economic powerlessness and sexual harassment. She must constantly navigate a world where her reputation is her only currency, a currency that men of power and privilege feel entitled to tarnish or steal at their whim. Ultimately, Nicholas Nickleby is a sprawling, energetic, and deeply moral novel. It weaves together the fates of dozens of characters, from the gloriously theatrical Crummles acting troupe to the kind-hearted Cheeryble brothers, who serve as the benevolent antidote to Ralph Nickleby's poison. It's a book that champions action over apathy, kindness over cruelty, and the creation of a chosen family over the betrayals of a biological one. While it has its share of wild coincidences and sentimental turns, its furious, passionate indictment of social injustice cemented Dickens's reputation as not just an entertainer, but as a powerful voice for the voiceless. Okay, let's talk about Little Nell. We have to talk about Little Nell. Published in serial form from 1840 to 1841, the Old Curiosity Shop became one of the most popular and, retrospectively, one of the most controversial novels of the 19th century. And it all hinges on the fate of one small, virtuous and relentlessly good child, Nell Trent. The story follows Nell and her loving grandfather as they flee London and wander through the English countryside. They are escaping the clutches of the novel's villain, the grotesque and malevolent dwarf Daniel Quilp, to whom the grandfather has gambled away his shop and home. The journey of Nell and her grandfather is the core of the novel. It's a pilgrimage through a landscape that is at times idyllic and at others deeply menacing. They encounter a vast array of characters typical of a Dickensian world: kindly schoolmasters, travelling puppeteers, grimy industrial workers, and waxwork proprietors. But through it all, the focus remains squarely on the relationship between the old man and the young girl. Her grandfather, weakened by his gambling addiction and increasingly detached from reality, becomes more and more dependent on Nell. She, in turn, becomes his protector, a child forced into the role of a parent, guiding him, caring for him, and shielding him from the harsh realities of their situation. This dynamic of a preternaturally wise and virtuous child caring for a failing adult is what drives the novel's intense emotional engine. Nell is portrayed as an almost angelic figure, an icon of innocence and purity in a corrupt and dangerous world. Her goodness is her defining characteristic. It shines like a beacon, attracting both the best and the worst of humanity. This unwavering purity is what made contemporary audiences fall so deeply in love with her. Readers across the Atlantic reportedly stormed the docks in New York, shouting to arriving ships, "Is little Nell dead?" The serialization created a kind of mass cultural event, a shared emotional experience that is difficult to comprehend today. However, this is also the source of modern criticism of the novel. The relentless sentimentality surrounding Nell can feel, to a 21st century reader, overwhelming and even emotionally manipulative. The famous writer Oscar Wilde famously quipped, "One must have a heart of stone to read the death of little Nell without laughing." While that's perhaps a bit harsh, it captures a certain truth. The character of Nell can feel less like a realistic child and more like a symbol, an allegorical figure of perfect goodness whose only possible narrative destiny is a tragic, beautiful death. The novel pushes the emotional levers so hard that for some they break entirely. But to dismiss the old curiosity shop as mere sentimentality is to miss the other, darker and arguably more fascinating side of the novel. Because for every angelic tear shed by little Nell, there's a malicious, cackling laugh from Daniel Quilp. Quilp is one of Dickens's most memorable and terrifying villains. He is a physically deformed, demonic figure of pure, unadulterated malice, who delights in tormenting everyone around him, especially his own wife. He eats hard-boiled eggs, shell and all, drinks boiling rum, and seems to exist in a state of perpetual, gleeful sadism. Quilp represents a chaotic, anarchic evil that stands in stark contrast to Nell's ordered, gentle goodness. He is the gargoyle on the cathedral, the monstrous force that seeks to defile and destroy everything pure. His pursuit of Nell and her grandfather is relentless and obsessive, driven by a desire not just for their money, but for the pleasure of their suffering. He is a creature of the London docks, of grime and smoke and moral decay, and his energy, however vile, gives the novel a powerful, nightmarish quality. Without the genuine threat posed by Quilp, the plight of Nell and her grandfather would lose much of its dramatic urgency. Beyond Quilp, the novel is populated by a rich tapestry of secondary characters who showcase Dickens's incredible range. There's Dick Swiveller, the perpetually cheerful, quote-spouting and irresponsible clerk who undergoes a significant moral transformation. His unlikely friendship and tender care for the lowly servant girl nicknamed the Marchioness provides a storyline of genuine, earned warmth that acts as a powerful counterpoint to the more saccharine elements of Nell's narrative. The story of Dick and the Marchioness is, for many readers, the true heart of the book. A small, beautiful tale of kindness found in the most unlikely of circumstances. So, The Old Curiosity Shop is a novel of extreme contrasts. It's a book of light and darkness, of angelic children and demonic villains, of heartbreaking tragedy and surprising comedy. It is a testament to Dickens's incredible power to manipulate the emotions of his readers, for better or for worse. While the pathos of Little Nell's story might not resonate as strongly today, the novel's darker elements, its vibrant characters, and its exploration of the strange, wandering journey of life ensure its place as a significant, if divisive, work in the Dickens canon. It pushes sentiment to its absolute limit, and in doing so reveals a great deal about the tastes and anxieties of the Victorian age. After the intense, contained emotion of The Old Curiosity Shop, Dickens decided to go big, really big, Barnaby Rudge, A Tale of the Riots of '80, published in 1841, was his first of only two historical novels. Instead of focusing on the contemporary social ills of the 1830s and 40s, Dickens casts his gaze back 60 years to the Gordon riots of 1780. This was a real historical event, a week of violent anti-Catholic rioting that engulfed London, led by the unstable Lord George Gordon. It was a period of intense social upheaval, religious intolerance, and mob violence, a perfect canvas for Dickens's dramatic sensibilities. The novel attempts to weave together a complex private story with this sprawling public event. On one hand, we have the story of the Haredale and Chester families, locked in a long-standing feud rooted in a mysterious, unsolved murder that occurred decades before the novel begins. This plot involves secret identities, thwarted love between Emma Haredale and Edward Chester, and the machinations of the foppish and villainous Sir John Chester. It's a Gothic mystery, full of dark secrets, family honour, and personal vendettas that slowly unravels as the story progresses, with its resolution tied directly to the chaos of the riots. On the other hand, we have the titular character, Barnaby Rudge. Barnaby is a simple-minded, good-natured young man who is often described as an idiot, though today we would likely use a more compassionate and accurate term for his cognitive disability. He wanders the world with his clever pet, Raven Grip, a raven that, by the way, was a major inspiration for Edgar Allan Poe's famous poem. Barnaby is swept up in the riots, his innocence and desire for excitement manipulated by the cynical leaders of the mob. He becomes a kind of unwitting symbol of the protest, a guileless figure caught in the midst of a violent, terrifying historical vortex. These two threads, the private murder mystery and the public historical drama, run in parallel for much of the novel before violently crashing into each other. Dickens uses the historical backdrop of the Gordon riots to explore themes that were deeply relevant to his own time. The dangers of religious bigotry, the terrifying power of mob mentality, and the way that private grievances can explode into public violence. He is fascinated by the psychology of a crowd, how a group of individuals can be whipped into a frenzy and become a destructive, unthinking monster, capable of burning down prisons like Newgate and threatening the very foundations of the city. One of the most compelling aspects of Barnaby Rudge is its exploration of how personal motivations become entangled with political causes. The leaders of the anti-Catholic protest are not all true believers. Lord George Gordon himself is portrayed as a sincere but deluded fanatic. His secretary Gashford is a manipulative sycophant, using the cause for his own advancement. And the brutish Hugh, a hostler at the Maypole Inn, joins the mob out of a raw, anarchic desire for destruction. Each character is drawn to the riots for different reasons, some for principle, some for profit, some for personal revenge, and some, like Barnaby, for reasons they don't fully understand. This makes the depiction of the riots themselves incredibly powerful and frightening. Dickens doesn't just show the grand scale of the destruction, he takes us into the heart of the mob, showing the individual faces in the crowd. We see the frenzy, the drunkenness, and the terrifying glee of people caught up in the act of tearing down the established order. The burning of Newgate Prison is a particularly apocalyptic sequence, a vision of hell on earth where the social contract is utterly dissolved. It's a stark warning about the fragility of civilization and the dark impulses that lie just beneath the surface of society. However, the novel is not without its flaws, and it is often considered one of Dickens's lesser works. The main criticism is that the two plots, the Haredale-Chester mystery and the historical account of the riots, don't always mesh together seamlessly. The first half of the book can feel quite slow as Dickens carefully lays the groundwork for the family mystery, with the riots feeling like a distant storm gathering on the horizon. For some readers, the intricate Gothic plot, with its long-lost heirs and secret documents, can feel a bit creaky and overwrought compared to the visceral energy of the riot scenes when they finally arrive. Despite this, Barnaby Rudge is a fascinating and ambitious book. It shows Dickens grappling with history on a grand scale, using the past to comment on the present. The character of Barnaby, a simple soul caught in the gears of history, is a poignant and memorable creation. And the novel's unflinching depiction of mob violence is a powerful and enduring cautionary tale. It may not be as tightly constructed as his later masterpieces, but it's a crucial step in his development as a writer, showcasing his willingness to tackle new genres and expand the scope of his fictional world beyond the streets of contemporary London. All right, so after the historical detour of Barnaby Rudge, Dickens returns to contemporary England with a vengeance in his sixth novel, Martin Chuzzlewit, published between 1843 and 1844. And if The Pickwick Papers was a sprawling comedy of innocence, and Oliver Twist a searing indictment of social neglect, Martin Chuzzlewit is something else entirely. A panoramic, almost surgical dissection of a singular human failing: selfishness. It's like Dickens decided to put the entire concept of self-interest under a microscope, examining its every grotesque and comical permutation. The story revolves around the extended Chuzzlewit family, a veritable viper's nest of greed, all circling the wealthy, elderly, and deeply suspicious patriarch, also named Martin Chuzzlewit. They're all convinced he's on his last legs, and they'll stop at nothing to secure a place in his will. The central plot follows young Martin Chuzzlewit, the old man's grandson, who is, to put it mildly, a bit of a self-absorbed brat. He believes the world owes him everything, a trait he seems to have inherited from, well, pretty much everyone else in his family. After a falling out with his grandfather over his love for Mary Graham, his grandfather's companion whom he's expected to care for, not marry, young Martin is cast out to make his own way in the world. This sets him on a journey that is both geographical and moral. He's accompanied by the eternally optimistic and good-natured Mark Tapley, a character who provides a brilliant contrast to the novel's pervasive greed. Mark's ambition is to find a situation so miserable that he can be jolly in it, thereby proving his cheerful nature is truly genuine. But the Chuzzlewit clan is just the beginning. Dickens populates this world with some of his most memorable and monstrously self-serving characters. You have the unctuous, hypocritical architect, Mr. Pecksniff, who takes on students like young Martin only to steal their designs and pass them off as his own. Pecksniff is a masterclass in performative virtue, constantly spouting moral platitudes while engaging in the most reprehensible behavior. Then there's the delightfully ghoulish undertaker, Mr. Mould, who sees death not as a tragedy but as a beautiful business opportunity. And let's not forget the scheming, murderous Jonas Chuzzlewit, a man so consumed by avarice that he becomes one of Dickens's most chilling villains, a far cry from the bumbling scoundrels of earlier works. Through these characters, Dickens isn't just telling a story about one dysfunctional family, he's crafting a powerful satire about the corrosive effects of greed on society as a whole. He argues through the novel's intricate plotting that a society built on individual self-interest without a corresponding sense of community, compassion or duty is doomed to become a hollow, predatory thing. The humor is sharp, often biting, and the tone is decidedly more cynical than his previous novels. It's a sprawling, sometimes messy book that reflects a growing darkness in Dickens's worldview, a sense that the problems of the world are not just about flawed institutions but about a fundamental flaw in human nature itself. Now, one of the most famous or perhaps infamous parts of Martin Chuzzlewit is when Dickens sends his protagonist across the Atlantic. In a bid to make his fortune, young Martin, along with the ever-jolly Mark Tapley, invests in a plot of land in a supposedly thriving American settlement called Eden. This section of the novel is directly inspired by Dickens's own trip to the United States in 1842, a trip that, let's just say, did not go as planned. He went expecting a utopian republic of enlightened citizens and instead found a society he viewed as crass, boastful and obsessed with money, not to mention the hypocrisy of a nation championing freedom while upholding the institution of slavery. The American episodes are a scathing, almost brutal satire. When Martin and Mark arrive at Eden, they don't find a bustling paradise, but a swampy, disease-ridden, mosquito-infested hellscape with a few ramshackle huts. The thriving settlement was nothing more than a fraudulent land scheme, a perfect metaphor for what Dickens saw as the hollowness of American boosterism. He paints American characters as caricatures, loud, uncouth, spitting tobacco everywhere, and ridiculously proud of a country they barely seem to understand. They are, in his telling, just as selfish and greedy as the Chuzzlewits back in England, but with an added layer of sanctimonious patriotism that Dickens found particularly galling. It's a portrait so unflattering that it caused a huge uproar in the United States. This American misadventure serves as the ultimate crucible for young Martin. Stripped of his pride, his money, and nearly his life after contracting malaria in the swamp, he is forced to confront the consequences of his own arrogance and selfishness. It is only at his absolute lowest point, nursed back to health by the indefatigable Mark Tapley, that Martin begins to change. He realizes that his sense of entitlement has led him to ruin, and that Mark's selfless cheerfulness is a source of genuine strength. This journey into the American wilderness is, therefore, a journey into the wilderness of his own soul, from which he emerges a humbler and better man, finally ready to appreciate the people who truly care for him. Despite the controversy, Martin Chuzzlewit was not initially a commercial success for Dickens. The serialized sales were disappointing, which is partly why he cooked up the American trip plot point, to inject some novelty and hopefully boost readership. However, the novel has since been recognized as a major turning point in his career. It showcases a new level of psychological depth and a more complex, cynical humor. It's the book where Dickens really hones his critique of the moral failings underpinning social structures, moving beyond specific institutions to tackle the very fabric of human character. It's a rich, challenging, and often hilarious exploration of what it means to be good in a world that seems to reward the bad. Published between 1846 and 1848, Dombey and Son marks a significant shift in Dickens's work. This is arguably his first novel where a single overarching theme dictates the entire structure, plot, and character development from the very first page. And that theme is pride, specifically the cold, unyielding pride of one man, Mr. Paul Dombey, and the devastating impact it has on everyone around him. The full title of the firm and the novel is Dombey and Son, and for Mr. Dombey, that's not just a business name, it's a worldview. The firm is his religion, and having a male heir to continue it is his sole purpose in life. Everything and everyone is secondary to that ambition. The novel opens with the birth of that long-awaited son, Paul. At the same moment, Mr. Dombey's wife, Fanny, dies, an event he views not as a human tragedy, but as an inconvenient business expense that has successfully produced the required asset. He has his son. The Dombey part of the equation is secure. His older child, a daughter named Florence, is completely ignored. In his cold, commercial calculus, a daughter is a bad investment, a non-entity with no role to play in the future of the firm. This central dynamic, Mr. Dombey's obsessive focus on his son and his cruel neglect of his daughter, forms the emotional core of the novel's first half, a heartbreaking portrait of a family devoid of warmth and love. Dickens uses this family tragedy to explore the profound changes happening in 19th century Britain. The Industrial Revolution is in full swing, and the rise of the railway, a powerful, disruptive new technology, is a recurring symbol throughout the book. The railway represents progress, change, and the relentless, destructive force of modern commerce, a force that mirrors Mr. Dombey's own personality. It tears through the old world, just as Dombey's pride tears through his family. The novel is a critique of a new kind of society where human relationships are becoming transactional, where a person's worth is measured not by their character or capacity for love, but by their market value. Tragically, for Mr. Dombey's grand plan, his son Paul is a frail, otherworldly child. He is old-fashioned, as the characters say, possessing an unnerving wisdom and a fragile constitution. He cannot bear the weight of his father's expectations. The scenes at his school, run by the comically inept Dr. Blimber, are both funny and deeply poignant, as the boy is force-fed a diet of intense classical education that his mind and body simply cannot handle. Paul's inevitable decline and death, which occurs about a third of the way through the novel, is one of the most famous and emotionally wrenching scenes in all of Dickens' literature. A moment that shattered the hearts of his contemporary readers and sealed the book's immense popularity. The death of young Paul is the pivotal moment of the novel. For Mr. Dombey, it is the ultimate business failure. The son is gone, and his entire life's project is in ruins. But instead of turning to his loving daughter Florence for comfort, his pride hardens into a bitter, resentful cruelty. He blames her for surviving when his precious son did not. The second half of the novel charts the slow, agonizing downfall of Mr. Dombey, a man who has everything, wealth, status, power, but who is emotionally bankrupt. His world, which he tried to control with such rigid, unfeeling logic, begins to crumble around him. both personally and professionally, as a direct result of his inability to love. His second marriage is a perfect example of his flawed, business-like approach to life. He marries the beautiful but proud and impoverished Edith Granger not for love, but because he needs a decorative, high-status wife to preside over his household. He sees her as another acquisition, an object to be owned. But Edith is not the meek woman he expects. She has her own fierce pride, and she refuses to be subjugated. Their relationship becomes a bitter war of wills, a cold and silent battle that culminates in her eloping with his treacherous business manager, Mr. Carker. Not out of passion for Carker, but as the ultimate act of defiance to humiliate her husband. Florence, meanwhile, endures years of emotional neglect and cruelty at her father's hands. She represents everything her father rejects: love, empathy, and feminine warmth. Her story is one of incredible resilience as she desperately seeks the paternal love that is constantly denied her. She eventually flees his house and finds refuge with the wonderfully eccentric Captain Cuttle, and marries her childhood friend Walter Gay, a young man her father had spitefully sent away. Florence builds the loving family life she was never allowed, creating a parallel world of warmth and affection that stands in stark contrast to the cold, empty grandeur of her father's mansion. Ultimately, Mr. Dombey loses everything. Betrayed by Carker, his firm collapses into bankruptcy, and he is left a broken, isolated old man, alone in his decaying house, contemplating suicide. It is only then, at his absolute nadir, that Florence returns to him. In a powerful and deeply moving climax, she finally breaks through his pride with her unwavering love and forgiveness. The novel ends with Mr. Dombey's redemption as he learns far too late the value of the daughter he spurned. Dombey and Son is a masterful, tightly constructed novel that critiques a world increasingly dominated by commerce and argues that no amount of wealth or power can replace the fundamental human need for love and connection. And then we come to David Copperfield. Published between 1849 and 1850, this is the big one. If you ask people to name a Dickens novel, this is often the first or second one they mention. And for good reason. It is, by Dickens's own admission, his favourite child, and it's not hard to see why. More than any of his other works, the personal history, adventures, experience and observation of David Copperfield, the younger of Blunderstone Rookery, which he never meant to be published on any account, yes, that's the full title, is deeply, profoundly autobiographical. It's the book where Dickens mined the traumas and triumphs of his own life to create his most personal and arguably his most beloved narrative. The story is told in the first person by David himself, looking back on his life from adulthood. This narrative choice creates an incredible sense of intimacy and immediacy. We experience the world through David's eyes, from the idyllic bliss of his early childhood with his gentle mother Clara and their kindly housekeeper Peggotty, to the sudden, terrifying arrival of his cruel stepfather, Mr. Murdstone. The Murdstones, both brother and sister, are practitioners of what they call firmness, a cold, controlling and abusive philosophy that crushes the spirit of both David and his mother. This early section of the book is a harrowing depiction of childhood trauma, drawing directly on Dickens's own feelings of being a sensitive, imaginative boy in a harsh, uncomprehending world. The parallels to Dickens's own life are undeniable and striking. After his mother's death, David is sent to work in a blacking warehouse in London, a direct fictionalization of the most traumatic event of Dickens's own childhood, when his father's debts landed the family in prison and forced a young Charles to work long, miserable hours gluing labels onto pots of shoe polish. The sense of shame, abandonment and despair that David feels is a powerful echo of Dickens's own experience. This period of his life haunted Dickens forever, and in David Copperfield he confronts it head-on, transforming his personal pain into universal art that speaks to the vulnerability of all children. But the novel is not just a catalogue of suffering, it's also a story of resilience and the search for family. David's escape from the warehouse and his long, arduous walk to Dover to find his only living relative, his formidable great-aunt Betsy Trotwood, is a turning point. Aunt Betsy is one of literature's great characters, eccentric, fierce, with a heart of gold hidden beneath a gruff exterior. Her immediate decision to rescue David from the Murdstones and raise him as her own provides the novel with one of its most powerful moments of hope and salvation. It's here that David's life truly begins anew, setting him on the path to becoming a gentleman and eventually a successful writer, just like his creator. While David's personal journey is the spine of the novel, what truly makes David Copperfield immortal is the astonishing gallery of characters that surrounds him. This book is populated with some of the most famous and enduring personalities in all of English literature, each one drawn with incredible detail and psychological insight. You have the eternally optimistic but hopelessly irresponsible Mr. Micawber, a character famously based on Dickens's own father. Mr. Micawber is always in debt, always composing florid letters, and always absolutely certain that something will turn up. He is a comic masterpiece, but also a deeply poignant portrait of financial struggle and endless, resilient hope. Then there is the villainous, ever so humble Uriah Heep, one of literature's most skin-crawling antagonists. Heep is a master of false modesty and passive aggression, constantly wringing his hands and proclaiming his own lowliness while secretly plotting to ruin his employer, Mr. Wickfield, and seize control of his business and his daughter Agnes. Heep represents a different kind of evil from Dickens's earlier villains. His is a psychological evil born of resentment and a twisted desire for power. His eventual exposure by Mr. Micawber in one of the book's most satisfying scenes is a triumph of good-hearted theatricality over slimy, insidious greed. The novel also gives us the Peggotty family, who live in a wonderfully bizarre house made from an overturned boat on the Yarmouth shore. Daniel Peggotty, the kind-hearted fisherman, his nephew Ham, and little Emily create a world of simple, steadfast love that serves as a moral anchor for David. The tragic story of little Emily's seduction by the handsome, wealthy, and morally bankrupt James Steerforth forms a major subplot, exploring themes of class, sexual morality, and the nature of betrayal. Steerforth, David's charismatic school friend whom he idolizes, represents the dark side of charm and privilege, a man who uses his power to destroy those who trust him. Ultimately, David Copperfield is a sprawling Bildungsroman, a novel of development and education that traces one man's journey from innocence to experience. It's about friendship, betrayal, the corrupting influence of wealth, and the redeeming power of love and loyalty. David's relationships with the two main women in his life, his beautiful but naive child wife Dora Spenlow and the wise, steadfast Agnes Wickfield, his better angel, trace his own emotional maturation. It is a rich, complex, and deeply human story that, more than any other book, cemented Dickens's reputation not just as a great social commentator, but as a master storyteller with an unparalleled understanding of the human heart. So, you think the legal system can be a bit slow? Well, Charles Dickens would like a word. Or, more accurately, about 350,000 of them in his 1853 masterpiece. This isn't just a novel, it's an indictment, a sprawling, atmospheric critique of a system so bogged down in its own procedures that it forgets the very people it's supposed to serve. At the heart of it all is the infamous, seemingly endless lawsuit of Jarndyce and Jarndyce. This case has been dragging on for generations, becoming a punchline, a curse, and a financial black hole that warps the lives of everyone even remotely connected to it. It's the ultimate symbol of institutional decay, a legal fog as thick and suffocating as the literal London fog that opens the novel. Dickens, who briefly worked as a law clerk in his youth, knew this world intimately. He saw firsthand how the Court of Chancery could consume fortunes and lives with its arcane rituals and endless delays. So when he describes the court, it's not just abstract satire, it's the frustration of lived experience poured onto the page. The case of Jarndyce and Jarndyce isn't about anything as simple as who gets the money anymore. It has become a self-perpetuating machine, a monstrous entity that feeds on legal fees, documents, and human hope, growing more complex and less comprehensible with every passing year, a perfect metaphor for systems that have lost their way. And into this legal labyrinth, Dickens throws a cast of characters as vast and varied as London itself. We have the kind-hearted John Jarndyce, the current owner of the Bleak House estate, who tries to shield his young wards, Richard Carstone and Ada Clare, from the corrupting influence of the lawsuit. He knows it's a poison, a family curse that promises riches but delivers only ruin. Richard, however, becomes obsessed, believing that a favourable resolution is just around the corner. He represents the tragic hope, the gambler's fallacy that so many victims of the Chancery system fell prey to, sacrificing their present for a future that the system itself would never allow to arrive. But here's where Dickens gets really innovative. Isn't just told from one perspective. He splits the narrative, giving us a dual-track storytelling experience that was groundbreaking for its time. Half of the story is told by a traditional omniscient third-person narrator whose voice is knowing, world-weary, and bitingly satirical. This narrator can see the entire corrupt system, from the highest lord to the lowliest street sweeper. This grand, sweeping perspective allows Dickens to paint a panoramic portrait of a society where everything and everyone is interconnected, often in ways they can't possibly comprehend, all tangled in the same web. The other half of the narrative, and arguably its heart, comes from our first-person narrator, the modest and intensely observant Esther Summerson. Esther is an orphan, raised with the constant, chilling reminder that she is her mother's disgrace. Her narrative is personal, intimate, and focused on the domestic sphere, on relationships, duty, and the search for identity and belonging. Her voice provides a powerful contrast to the sweeping, impersonal tone of the omniscient narrator. While one narrator diagnoses the sickness of society, Esther shows us the human cost, the quiet suffering and small kindnesses that exist within the cracks of that broken system. It's a brilliant structural choice. This narrative duality is the engine of the novel. The omniscient narrator shows us the fog, the mud, the sprawling impersonal forces of law and society. Then we switch to Esther's perspective, and we see the individual trying to navigate that fog, trying to make a meaningful life despite the secrets and shame that cloud her own origins. It's a dance between the public and the private, the societal and the personal. The grand, sweeping story of institutional failure is constantly grounded by Esther's very human story of finding a family, falling in love, and discovering the truth about her parentage, which is, of course, a central and shocking mystery of the plot. And what a mystery it is. Beyond the critique of the legal system is also one of the first great detective novels in English literature. We have the dogged Inspector Bucket, a methodical and surprisingly compassionate police detective investigating the murder of the sinister lawyer, Mr. Tulkinghorn. Bucket's investigation cuts across all social strata, from the opulent drawing room of the icy Lady Dedlock to the squalid poverty of the slum known as Tom All Alone's. His pursuit of the truth demonstrates, once again, Dickens's core theme, that the lives of the rich and poor are inextricably and often tragically linked together. Ultimately, the resolution of Jarndyce and Jarndyce is one of the most savage and cynical moments in all of Dickens's work. After decades of legal wrangling, the case is finally concluded, only for the lawyers to announce that the entire estate, every last penny, has been completely consumed by court costs. There is nothing left. It's a devastating punchline that perfectly encapsulates the novel's critique. The system didn't serve justice, it simply served itself until its host was bled dry. Is a monumental achievement, a complex, angry, and deeply humane novel that uses its dual narrative to explore the failures of society and the resilience of the human heart. Welcome to Coketown, a fictional industrial city in the north of England and the setting for Dickens's 1854 novel. And let me tell you, Coketown is not a place you'd want to visit. It's a town of red brick stained black with soot, where smoke serpents coil out of chimneys and the river runs a polluted purple. It's a place where every building is grimly identical and every day is exactly the same as the one before. Coketown is the physical manifestation of the novel's central villain, a rigid, soul-crushing philosophy known as utilitarianism, which prioritized cold, hard facts and rational self-interest above all else. This is Dickens at his most polemical, writing his shortest and perhaps most focused critique of societal ills. The chief evangelist of this philosophy is the formidable Thomas Gradgrind, a retired hardware merchant who has dedicated his life to the principle of fact, fact, fact. He runs a school where children are not treated as individuals but as little pitchers to be filled to the brim with quantifiable data. Imagination, fancy, wonder, these are all forbidden. We see this in the very first chapter, where he berates a young girl, Sissy Jupe, for being unable to define a horse in a purely factual manner. For Gradgrind, a horse is a quadruped, graminivorous, 40 teeth and nothing more. There's no room for the beauty, the spirit, or the utility of the animal in his worldview. Gradgrind raises his own children, Louisa and Tom, in this intellectual greenhouse, completely shielding them from art, stories, and emotion. He believes he is creating perfect, rational human beings. But what he actually creates are emotional voids. Louisa grows up intelligent but deeply unhappy, starved of the affection and imagination that make life worth living. Tom becomes cynical, selfish, and resentful, utterly unequipped to handle the moral complexities of the world. Dickens uses the Gradgrind family to show the profound, damaging consequences of an education system that neglects the heart and the spirit in its relentless pursuit of the mind. It is a powerful argument for a holistic view of human nature. This philosophy extends beyond the classroom and into the world of industry. Gradgrind's close friend is the factory owner Josiah Bounderby, a man who constantly boasts of being a self-made man who pulled himself up from the gutter. He is, in his own words, the bully of humility, a man who has turned his supposed hard-knock life into a weapon to use against his own workers, the hands. Bounderby treats his employees not as people but as cogs in his industrial machine, useful only for their labor and easily disposable. He embodies the callousness and hypocrisy that Dickens saw at the heart of the new industrial capitalism, a system built on facts and figures that ignored human suffering. So, where is the antidote to the grim reality of Coketown and the philosophy of Gradgrind? Well, in one of the most delightful and surprising twists in Dickens's entire body of work, the answer lies with the circus, specifically Sleary's horse riding circus, a travelling troupe of performers who represent everything that Gradgrind and Bounderby despise: imagination, community, entertainment, and genuine human connection. The circus is a world of vibrant colour, chaotic energy, and heartfelt loyalty, a stark contrast to the monotonous grey of Coketown. It's the repository of fancy, the very thing Gradgrind tried to stamp out of existence. The circus is home to Sissy Jupe, the girl who couldn't define a horse but knows how to care for one. After her father, a clown, abandons her, she is taken in by the Gradgrinds, becoming a quiet, subversive force of empathy within their fact-obsessed household. Sissy may fail at her lessons, but she possesses an emotional intelligence and a moral compass that the Gradgrind children desperately lack. She is the living, breathing proof that there are truths of the heart that cannot be measured, quantified, or entered into a ledger. Through Sissy, Dickens argues that compassion and kindness are forms of knowledge just as valid and far more important than any collection of facts. The novel's plot turns on the failures of Gradgrind's system. Louisa, seeking escape from her empty existence, enters a loveless marriage with the much older Bounderby, a decision she makes with a chillingly logical detachment. This disastrous union eventually leads her to the brink of an affair, and she finally breaks down, returning to her father and crying, "All I know is your philosophy and your teaching will not save me." It is a moment of profound crisis for Gradgrind, the first crack in his fortress of facts, as he is forced to confront the human wreckage his philosophy has created. Meanwhile, his son Tom, corrupted by a life without moral guidance, embezzles money from Bounderby's bank and frames an innocent, hard-working factory worker named Stephen Blackpool. In the end, it is the circus folk, the people of fancy, who help Tom escape the law, not out of any agreement with his actions but out of loyalty to Sissy. Is a stark allegory, a morality play about the dangers of a society that values utilitarian logic over human empathy. It's a passionate and at times furious plea for a world that makes room for wonder, for art, and for the messy, unquantifiable beauty of the human soul. If was about the prison of the law and was about the prison of a philosophy, then Dickens's 1857 novel is about the prison of, well, prison, and also the prison of debt, of social class, of government bureaucracy, and even the prison of one's own past. This is a novel saturated with the theme of confinement, both literal and metaphorical. At its centre stands the imposing real-life institution of the Marshalsea, a debtor's prison in London, where Dickens' own father had been incarcerated. This personal history infuses the novel with a profound sense of authenticity and a deep, lingering melancholy that is almost palpable. The story revolves around the Dorrit family, who have been imprisoned in the Marshalsea for over 20 years because of the father's debts. The patriarch, William Dorrit, has been there so long that he has become a prison institution himself. He is known, with a mixture of pity and respect, as the father of the Marshalsea. He has developed an elaborate persona of a refined gentleman who has merely fallen on hard times, creating a fragile social hierarchy within the prison walls to maintain his own sense of dignity. It's a tragic and complex portrait of how humans adapt to even the most degrading circumstances, clinging to social fictions to survive. His youngest daughter, Amy, known as Little Dorrit, was born in the prison and knows no other world. Unlike her father, who is trapped by his pride, or her sister Fanny and brother Tip, who are consumed by resentment, Amy is defined by her selfless devotion and quiet resilience. She is the novel's moral center, a figure of unassuming grace who works as a seamstress outside the prison walls to support her family within them. She is the child of the Marshalsea, and her entire identity is shaped by her duty to her father and her love for her broken family. She is free to leave the prison during the day, yet she is emotionally tethered to it, returning each night to her small room. The novel's other protagonist is Arthur Clenham, a middle-aged man returning to London after spending 20 years in China with his family's business. He is trapped in a psychological prison of his own, haunted by a joyless upbringing under the thumb of his cold, stern and fanatically religious mother. Suspecting that his family's fortune may be connected to the Dorrit's misfortune, Arthur sets out to uncover the secret, a quest that brings him to the Marshalsea, where he meets little Dorrit. He is immediately struck by her quiet strength and goodness, and a tender, tentative relationship begins to form between these two lonely souls. Arthur's quest for the truth inevitably leads him to one of Dickens's most brilliant and infuriating satirical creations, the Circumlocution Office. This is the government department in charge of, well, nobody is quite sure. Its sole purpose seems to be preventing anything from ever getting done. It is the bureaucratic heart of the nation, a place of endless forms, pointless procedures, and official obfuscation, all designed to protect the interests of the well-connected Barnacle family who run it. The motto of the Circumlocution Office is "How Not to Do It," and it is a perfect, maddening symbol of institutional paralysis and governmental incompetence. This satire was incredibly potent in Victorian Britain, tapping into public frustration with a government that seemed incapable of managing the problems of a rapidly changing nation. For Arthur Clenham, the Circumlocution Office represents a brick wall. Every attempt he makes to find information about the Dorrit case is met with polite, infuriating obstruction. Dickens uses this to expand his theme of imprisonment beyond the stone walls of the Marshalsea. The entire country, he suggests, is trapped by a system that stifles initiative, rewards incompetence, and grinds the individual down with its soul-destroying inefficiency. It is a prison of red tape. Then, in a stunning reversal of fortune, a secret is revealed, and the Dorrits discover they are heirs to a vast fortune. They are suddenly freed from the Marshalsea and thrust into the highest echelons of European society. But this is Dickens. So freedom isn't that simple. The family finds that they cannot escape the prison of their own past. William Dorrit becomes insufferably arrogant, desperately trying to erase the shame of his years in prison, while his other children become vain and cruel. They have left the Marshalsea, but the Marshalsea has not left them. They are now imprisoned by the anxieties and expectations that come with their new wealth. In the end, the Dorrit fortune is lost in a massive financial crash engineered by the novel's villain, the suave and mysterious financier Mr. Merdle. Another prison of sorts, the prison of speculation and greed. The family is left with nothing, and William Dorrit dyes his mind, having returned to his days as the father of the Marshalsea. It is only Amy, little Dorrit, who remains unchanged by wealth or poverty. The novel ends not with riches, but with the quiet, humble union of Arthur and Amy, two people who have found freedom not in money or status, but in their love for one another. Is a profound, sprawling examination of how society traps us and how selfless love might be the only key to our release. All right, let's open our books to 1859 and Dickens's 12th novel. And if you only know one thing about this book, it's probably its opening line, which is one of the most famous opening lines in all of literature. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, it was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness, and so on. It's this magnificent, sprawling sentence of contradictions that perfectly sets the stage for a story steeped in duality, in stark contrasts, and in the turbulent, violent, and frankly terrifying backdrop of the French Revolution. This isn't your typical sprawling, Dickensian, London-centric novel. Here, the action is famously split between London and Paris, two cities caught in the maelstrom of historical change. Unlike many of his other works that are densely populated with a veritable phone book of eccentric characters, is more of a plot-driven historical thriller. It's leaner, more focused, and relentless in its pacing. The story centers on the French doctor, Alexandre Manette, who, after being secretly imprisoned in the Bastille for 18 years, is finally released and reunited in London with his daughter, Lucy, whom he has never met. This reunion sets in motion a chain of events that will inextricably link their lives with a cast of unforgettable characters, including the earnest French émigré, Charles Darnay, and the cynical, alcoholic, yet brilliant English barrister, Sidney Carton. It's a tale of resurrection, not just for Dr. Manette, but for several characters who are given a second chance at life and love. The central conflict, beyond the whole revolution thing, revolves around a love triangle of sorts. Both Charles Darnay and Sidney Carton are in love with the gentle and compassionate Lucy Manette. Darnay, the handsome and honourable man, seems like the obvious choice. Carton, on the other hand, sees himself as a worthless, wasted man, a jackal to his more successful legal partner. He is one of Dickens's most complex and fascinating creations, a man who drowns his sorrows and his potential in alcohol, yet possesses a profound capacity for love and ultimately for sacrifice. His unrequited love for Lucy becomes the catalyst for his transformation, a journey from nihilism to a profound, world-altering purpose that is just devastatingly beautiful. And so the personal drama of these characters plays out against the epic blood-soaked canvas of the French Revolution. The worst of times is not just a poetic flourish. Dickens vividly portrays the grinding poverty and oppression of the French peasantry that led to the uprising, and then the subsequent reign of terror, where the guillotine becomes a horrifying symbol of revolutionary justice gone mad. We see the storming of the Bastille, the rise of figures like Madame Defarge, who knits the names of the revolution's enemies into her register, and the constant, pervasive fear that grips Paris. It's a powerful examination of how societal injustice can breed monstrous violence, and how personal lives are swept up and often destroyed by the grand, impersonal forces of history. The narrative genius lies in how Dickens weaves these personal and historical threads together. Charles Darnay, it turns out, is not just some random Frenchman. He is an aristocrat, the nephew of the cruel Marquis Saint-Evremond, who has renounced his family name and title in disgust at their cruelty. This secret identity puts him in immense danger when he is lured back to Paris during the height of the terror. He believes he can help an old servant, but he immediately finds himself imprisoned and condemned to death simply because of his bloodline. The revolution, which began as a fight for justice, has become a machine of indiscriminate vengeance, and Darnay is caught in its gears, a symbol of how ideals can curdle into fanaticism. This is where the story's themes of resurrection and sacrifice come to their stunning climax. With Darnay facing the guillotine, the fate of Lucy and her child hangs in the balance. All hope seems lost. But remember Sidney Carton, the cynical lawyer who looks uncannily like Charles Darnay? He has been lingering in the background, his love for Lucy a constant, quiet hum beneath the roar of the revolution. He sees a path to redemption, a way to give his seemingly wasted life meaning. He devises a daring plan to use his physical resemblance to Darnay to save the man Lucy loves, even if it means sacrificing himself. This is the ultimate test of his character, the moment his potential for greatness finally blossoms. The final chapters of the novel are a masterclass in suspense and emotional power. Carton's plan to switch places with Darnay in the prison is fraught with peril, a high-stakes gamble against the ruthless revolutionary tribunal. Dickens builds the tension to an almost unbearable degree as Carton walks through the chaotic streets of Paris towards his destiny. It is a journey of profound personal transformation, as the man who once saw no value in his own life prepares to give it away for the happiness of others. He is no longer the drunken jackal, but a figure of Christ-like sacrifice, finding his ultimate purpose in an act of supreme love and selflessness, proving that even the most seemingly lost souls are capable of grace. And this leads us to the novel's other iconic line, Carton's final thoughts as he approaches the guillotine. It is a far, far better thing that I do than I have ever done. It is a far, far better rest that I go to than I have ever known. It is one of the most moving and memorable conclusions in literature, a testament to the redemptive power of sacrifice. The novel ends not with the triumph of revolution or the restoration of an old order, but with this intensely personal act of love. Ultimately argues that true lasting change and true resurrection are found not in grand political movements, but in the quiet, profound capacity of the human heart for compassion and self-sacrifice. From the blood-soaked streets of revolutionary Paris, we travel to the misty, desolate marshes of Kent for Dickens's 13th novel, published in 1861. If was Dickens looking back at his youth with a certain fondness, is a more mature, more psychologically complex, and frankly, more critical examination of a young man's journey into the world. This is another of Dickens' great first-person narratives, told from the perspective of Philip Pirrip, better known to the world and to himself as Pip. The novel is essentially a Bildungsroman, a coming-of-age story, but it's one that relentlessly interrogates the very nature of ambition, class, love, and what it truly means to be a gentleman. The story begins with one of the most famous opening scenes in all of fiction. The young orphan Pip is visiting the graves of his parents in a lonely churchyard when he is suddenly accosted by an escaped convict, Abel Magwitch. This terrifying encounter, where Magwitch threatens to eat Pip's heart and liver if he doesn't bring him food and a file to remove his leg iron, will haunt Pip for the rest of his life. It establishes the novel's key themes of guilt, secrecy, and the unexpected, often terrifying ways our lives become entangled with others. This single frightening event on the marshes sets the entire intricate plot in motion, a debt that will come due in the most unexpected of ways years later. Pip is being raised by hand by his short-tempered older sister and her kind, simple-hearted blacksmith husband, Joe Gargery. Joe is one of Dickens' most purely good characters, a gentle giant whose quiet decency stands in stark contrast to the snobbery and cruelty Pip will later encounter. Pip's humble life is turned upside down when he is summoned to Satis House, the crumbling Gothic mansion of the eccentric and wealthy, recluse Miss Havisham. She is a woman frozen in time, still wearing the wedding dress she had on decades earlier when she was jilted at the altar. The clocks in her house are all stopped at that fateful moment, and she lives in the decaying darkness, nursing her broken heart and plotting a twisted revenge on the entire male gender. At Satis House, Pip meets the object of Miss Havisham's scheme, her beautiful, cold and cruel adopted daughter Estella. Miss Havisham is raising Estella to be a heartbreaker, to torment and ensnare men as revenge for her own romantic tragedy, and Pip is to be her first victim, her practice run. Estella relentlessly mocks Pip's coarse hands and thick boots, instilling in him a deep sense of shame about his humble origins and a desperate longing to become a gentleman worthy of her. This is the birth of Pip's great expectations, a desire not just for wealth and status, but for a different kind of life, one he believes will win him Estella's love and erase the shame of his working-class roots. Hi, I'm Dave B., and welcome back to our chronological exploration of every Dickens novel ever. So picture this, it's 1864, Dickens is now a global literary superstar, the undisputed heavyweight champion of the novel, but he's also older, perhaps a bit more cynical, and definitely more interested in the intricate, often grimy machinery of society. This brings us to his 14th and final completed novel. This isn't the youthful, exuberant Dickens this is a master craftsman examining the very soul of Victorian London. And let me tell you, he finds it in some pretty strange places. Like, for instance, in giant, mysterious mounds of dust. These aren't just any dust heaps, they are the source of the vast Harmon family fortune. The story kicks off when the heir, John Harmon, is presumed drowned in the River Thames, his body pulled from the murky water by a scavenger named Gaffer Hexam. This single event sets off a chain reaction of greed, deception, and unexpected kindness that ripples throughout the entire narrative. The inheritance, you see, is now supposed to pass to the family's good-hearted but illiterate servants, Mr. and Mrs. Boffin. Suddenly, these simple, unassuming people are thrust into the dizzying world of London's high society, a world for which they are entirely unprepared. It's a classic Dickensian setup. What does wealth do to people, especially those who never expected it? And then there's the river. The Thames Inn is more than just a setting, it's a character in its own right. A dark, brooding presence that gives up bodies and secrets with equal reluctance. It's the source of Gaffer Hexam's grim livelihood, a place of death and rebirth, and a powerful symbol for the moral pollution that Dickens sees running through the city. The novel constantly contrasts the dirty, physical reality of the river and the dust heaps with the supposedly clean, refined world of the upper classes. But Dickens, being Dickens, is here to tell us that the grime isn't just in the water. It's in the hearts of the wealthy, the ambitious, and the desperate alike. This focus on wealth and its origins is a profound critique of capitalism in its rawest form. Where does money? In this case, it literally comes from garbage. from the refuse of a sprawling city. Dickens is making a powerful and frankly pretty radical statement here that the foundation of great fortunes is often built on something society deems worthless, dirty, and disposable. The boffins, suddenly known as the Golden Dustmen, become a walking, talking embodiment of this strange paradox, navigating a world that both worships their new money and secretly despises its foul origins, forcing us to ask who really is the refuse in this society. At the heart of is a sprawling cast of characters, each wrestling with questions of identity, often hidden behind masks of their own making. Take, for instance, the supposedly deceased John Harmon. Spoiler alert for a 160-year-old book, but he isn't actually dead. He survives and adopts the alias John Rokesmith, taking a job as the secretary to the very people who inherited his fortune, the boffins. He does this to observe, to understand the world that was almost his, and most importantly, to see if the woman he was meant to marry as part of his inheritance, the beautiful but proud Bella Wilfer, would have married him for his money or for himself. It's a complex, slightly creepy but utterly compelling romantic investigation. Bella Wilfer herself is one of Dickens's most complex female characters. She's initially portrayed as openly mercenary, lamenting the loss of the Harmon fortune and her chance to be a mercenary little wretch. Her journey from this cynical, money-obsessed young woman to someone who learns to value love and integrity over wealth is one of the central emotional arcs of the novel. Her transformation is facilitated by her interactions with the kind-hearted boffins and the mysterious John Rokesmith, forcing her to confront the emptiness of her material desires. It's a powerful exploration of whether a person's character is fixed or if it can be redeemed through experience and genuine human connection. Meanwhile, we have another key plot line involving the intense and obsessive schoolmaster Bradley Headstone and his all-consuming passion for Lizzie Hexam, the waterman's daughter. Headstone represents the dark side of social mobility and repressed desire. He is a man who has clawed his way out of poverty through sheer force of will and education, but his respectable veneer is incredibly thin. His jealousy of Lizzie's other suitor, the charming but feckless lawyer Eugene Rayburn, drives him to madness and violence. This subplot is a dark psychological thriller embedded within a social satire, showcasing Dickens's incredible range as a storyteller. Ultimately, is a novel about surfaces and what lies beneath. The surface of the river hides the dead, the surface of the dust heap hides a fortune, and the polite surfaces of society hide greed, passion, and desperation. Characters constantly adopt new names, new roles, and new personalities to navigate this treacherous world. Dickens seems to be arguing that in a society so obsessed with money and status, one's true identity is a fragile, mutable thing. It is only through stripping away these pretenses, sometimes voluntarily, sometimes violently, that characters can discover who they truly are and what they truly value. It's a dense, dark, and deeply rewarding novel. And now we arrive at the great what-if of the Dickensian universe, his 15th and final novel, published in 1870. And when I say final, I mean it in the most literal and tragic sense. Charles Dickens died suddenly of a stroke after having written only 6 of the planned 12 installments. He left behind a tantalizing, infuriatingly brilliant mystery with no resolution. It's like getting to the last episode of a season of television and having the screen cut to black right at the cliffhanger, only in this case the showrunner has passed away and no one will ever know how it was supposed to end. The story is set not in the familiar grime of London, but in the fictional cathedral city of Cloisterham, which is heavily based on Rochester, a place Dickens knew and loved since childhood. The plot centres on the title character Edwin Drood, a young, somewhat callow engineer who is betrothed to the beautiful Rosa Budd. This engagement was arranged by their deceased fathers, and honestly, neither of them seems particularly thrilled about it. There's a distinct lack of passion, a sense of duty hanging over their relationship, which immediately signals to the reader that things are, shall we say, complicated. And in a Dickens novel, complicated is just the beginning. The central conflict and the source of the mystery is the intense, brooding, and frankly very creepy choirmaster of the cathedral, John Jasper. Jasper is Edwin's uncle and guardian, and he is secretly, obsessively in love with his nephew's fiancée, Rosa. He's also, and this is a key detail, an opium addict, leading a dark double life that takes him from the hallowed halls of the cathedral to the squalid opium dens of London. Jasper's internal turmoil, His barely concealed jealousy of Edwin and his menacing presence make him the immediate and most obvious suspect. When, following a stormy Christmas Eve, Edwin Drood disappears without a trace. The setup is pure detective fiction, a genre that was still in its infancy, but which Dickens was clearly fascinated by. He gives us a cast of potential suspects and red herrings. There's Neville Landless, a hot-tempered young man from Ceylon who has a public, violent quarrel with Edwin just before his disappearance. There's Neville's twin sister Helena, who is fiercely protective of her brother. There's even a strange, cantankerous stonemason named Durdles who knows all the secrets of the cathedral's crypt. Dickens masterfully lays the groundwork, weaving a web of secrets, lies, and hidden motives that has captivated readers and critics for over 150 years. The disappearance of Edwin Drood is the event that fractures the novel, leaving us with a puzzle that has spawned countless theories, continuations, and adaptations. The most pressing question, of course, is who killed Edwin Drood, or for that matter, is he even dead? Some theories propose that Edwin is alive and in hiding, perhaps waiting to expose his attacker at a dramatic final moment. But most readers, then and now, have concluded that he was murdered. And the prime suspect has always been his uncle, John Jasper. The evidence is circumstantial but compelling. His motive is clear, his behavior is suspicious, and his double life suggests a capacity for great darkness. Dickens himself reportedly left very few clues about his intended ending. His friend and biographer, John Forster, claimed that Dickens had told him Jasper was the murderer. But even that isn't as simple as it sounds. How would Jasper have done it? What would his ultimate fate be? Some clues in the text suggest he might have used a quicklime pit to dispose of the body, a grim detail that would have been right up Dickens's alley. The unfinished nature of the book means that Jasper remains one of literature's most fascinating and unresolved villains, a portrait of psychological torment frozen in time. Beyond the central whodunit, the novel introduces other intriguing characters who were clearly meant to play larger roles. One of the most memorable is Dick Datchery, a mysterious white-haired stranger who arrives in Cloisterham after Drood's disappearance and begins his own private investigation, seemingly determined to uncover Jasper's secrets. The true identity of Datchery is perhaps the second greatest mystery of the book. Is he a new character, or is he one of the existing characters in disguise? Theories have suggested he could be Neville Landless, another character named Bazard, or even, in some of the more creative readings, Helena Landless, or a surviving Edwin Drood himself. Ultimately stands as a testament to Dickens's enduring power as a storyteller, even in an incomplete form. The writing is sharp, the atmosphere is thick with dread, and the psychological complexity of characters like Jasper shows an author still at the height of his powers. It's a ghost of a novel, a tantalizing glimpse of what might have been. Its incompletion has ironically ensured its immortality, turning readers into detectives and guaranteeing that the conversation around Dickens's final work will, unlike the story itself, never truly have an end. It is a final, fittingly enigmatic legacy for a literary giant. And there you have it. From the rollicking comedy of Samuel Pickwick to the haunting, unresolved mystery of Edwin Drood, we've journeyed through the complete fictional universe of one of literature's most influential and enduring voices. 15 novels, hundreds of unforgettable characters, and a legacy that has shaped how we think about storytelling, social justice, and the complexities of the human heart. Dickens didn't just write stories, he built worlds that were as vibrant, chaotic, and full of life as the Victorian London he knew so well. He used his platform to entertain, yes, but also to challenge, to critique, and to call for a more compassionate world. His work is a testament to the power of the serial format, the joy of a sprawling narrative, and the importance of empathy. He could make you laugh out loud with the antics of the Micawbers, and then break your heart with the plight of Little Nell or the quiet suffering of Little Dorrit. He gave us villains like Fagin and heroes like David Copperfield, painting with a palette that included the brightest joys and the darkest sorrows of the human experience. His influence is everywhere, from the way we structure our television series to our very idea of a traditional snowy Christmas. He wasn't just a novelist, he was a cultural force. So, we want to extend a huge thank you for joining us on this literary journey through the life and works of the inimitable Charles Dickens. It has been an absolute pleasure to revisit these timeless classics with you, from the most famous opening lines to the most tragic, unfinished endings. The world of Dickens is vast and endlessly rewarding. And we've only really scratched the surface of the scholarship and love that these novels continue to inspire. We hope this exploration has encouraged you to pick up a Dickens novel you've never read, or perhaps to revisit an old favourite with fresh eyes. But now the conversation turns to you. What is your favourite Dickens novel? Are you a purist? Do you have a soft spot for the legal tangles of? Or are you one of the brave souls who has a theory about how it was supposed to end? Let us know in the comments below. We would genuinely love to hear your thoughts and start a discussion. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into literary history, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for much more bookish content coming your way. Thanks for watching.